Sourcery is probably the worst Discworld novel. This isn't to say that it's bad, mind you, just that it's probably the weakest entry of the series, and it perfectly illustrates the concept of diminishing returns. According to the magic of Terry Pratchett, our beloved author only wrote this book after fan demand for Rincewind to return, and honestly, it shows. It very much feels like an attempt to recapture the magic of the light fantastic, but a failed one, merely going through the motions like a housewife who lies back and thinks of England. So, with such an unflattering description, you're probably wondering, what is sorcery? Okay, so you know that a wizard is the eighth son of an eighth son, right? Okay, well, have you ever wondered what would happen if a wizard had an eighth son? The answer is that it would produce a wizard squared, someone who doesn't need to learn magic because he makes magic. He is a fountain, a source of unlimited magical power. A sorcerer, if you will. And one day, while minding his own business in the unseen university gardens, Rincewind and the other university staff members run afoul of just such a being, a young boy named Coin who possesses godlike power and who promises to create a new age of magic. As the wizards slowly fall prey to Coin's promises of power, it's up to Rincewind to stand against this all-powerful threat against humanity. That is, if he can stop himself from running away long enough. How does the world of sorcery work? Well, the most obvious world-building detail this book contributes is, of course, explaining why it is that wizards remain celibate, or at least avoid having 8 sons. Having an unlimited source of magic tends to mess with the few physical laws that govern the disc, and when reality starts to warp, it can turn the disc into another dungeon dimension, which doesn't bode well for all the pesky humans that live on the disc. While the Kingdom of Klatch was at least mentioned earlier, Sourcery is the first book where the characters properly visit the place, and a lot of the details of it, such as it being ruled by a serif and it having magic carpets, genies and lamps, and sexy harem ladies, are established in this book. It's basically a bog-standard parody of the Arabian Nights, but that at least makes it more enjoyable than a throwaway dig against British Asians, which it was back in Mort. This is also the first book to introduce Vetinari, the patrician and ruler of Ankh-Morpork, although there is still debate over whether or not he was the unnamed patrician in The Color of Magic. He does absolutely nothing except get turned into a lizard. Don't worry, he gets better. There's also one concept which makes sense for Pratchett to examine, but which I really wish he had left alone, especially since I would argue that it's just as harmful as the sexism he criticized with Equal Rights. To explain what that concept is and why Pratchett probably discussed it, though, it's perhaps best for me to explain what does sorcery have to say. The answer is almost nothing, because it's trying to recapture the light fantastic in a bottle. However, there's one major problem with this attempt. You see, the Light Fantastic ended with Rincewind and his friends all getting a happy ending. Cohen got married and a nice pair of dentures, Two Flower went back home to tell everyone about his travels, the luggage was enjoying itself by Rincewind's side, and Rincewind re-enrolled in Unseen University, confident that the absence of the Octavos spell in his brain would finally allow him to learn magic. In order for Rincewind to go on another wacky misadventure, though, it becomes necessary for this happy ending to be shattered. And so, at the beginning of Sourcery, we learn that while Rincewind may no longer have that handy Deus Ex Machina in his skull, no spell wants the Octavos' sloppy seconds. And Rincewind will prove to have even less magical ability than he did in the first 2 books for the rest of the series. Pratchett was at least kind enough to let Cohen and Two Flower keep their happy endings, in this book anyways, but this means that Rincewind needs someone else to talk to over the course of his adventure, since the luggage and the librarian can't really say much between them besides ook. As such, 2 new characters are introduced, Conina the Barbarian and Nigel the Destroyer. They're both terrible, but they're each terrible for different reasons. Nigel is meant to play the same role as Two Flower, as the plucky, kinda dim sidekick to Rincewind, but instead of being a parody of tourists, Nigel is a parody of nerds. Or, I mean, if you can even call it a parody when, they make some token jokes at his expense, but they still give him everything he ever wanted. Nigel is an archetype indicative of the worst kind of nerd entitlement. Someone who is spotty and clumsy and not very bright, but who still gets himself a sexy girlfriend without even trying to, because you too, reader, may be a nerd, but you're still entitled to a sexy girlfriend because you just are. You don't ever have to improve yourself in any way or even bathe regularly. Your simple niceness will simply blow supermodels off their feet, because we all know how much women love nice guys. Nice guys. Kanina, meanwhile, gets the dubious honor of being Nigel's sexy girlfriend. However, she also continues Pratchett's trend of examining Conan the Barbarian from a different angle, in this case, the angle of Robert E. Howard's theories on race and ancestry. Let's be clear before I go any further. A criticism of an author or their work is not a criticism of the people who enjoy that work. If I say Robert E. Howard was a racist, that does not mean fans of Robert E. Howard are also racists and they should feel bad for enjoying him. If you are a Conan fan and you interpret my comments in that way, that's on you. I'm not in the habit of telling people what they should or shouldn't enjoy, merely telling them what to expect from a work or creator. And in the case of the author of The Valley of the Worm, Wolf's Head, and Blow the Down, Robert E. Howard was indeed very, very racist. I am Conan, a Cimmerian, and I live by the sword's edge. But I am not such a dog as to leave a white woman in the clutches of a black man. If you were old and ugly as the devil's pet vulture, I'd take you away from Bajuj simply because of the color of your hide. But you are young and beautiful, and I have looked at black sluts until I am sick of the guts.
Wow.
This racism tended to manifest itself in his works through commentary on racial degradation and racial memory. Certain bloodlines and races possess certain inherent qualities, and when these bloodlines or races mix, it tends to result in a dilution of those qualities, which mostly manifests itself by the people turning into wicked savages or foppish civilized men. This is why Howard holds barbarism up as the pinnacle of human expression, because it's supposed to be the happy medium between the two extremes, what humans will look like if they keep their bloodline and race pure. How does this tie into Sourcery? Well, while The Color of Magic presented the concept of Conan the Barbarian in a humorous light, and The Light Fantastic presented the concept with a humorous twist, Sourcery decides to examine the underlying philosophy of Conan in a humorous manner, with the character of Kanina. Kanina is Conan the Barbarian's daughter, and she really just wants to be a hairdresser, but thanks to her hereditary barbarism, she is naturally inclined to be thick and sinewy and to fly into berserker rages when in the heat of battle. It's the same idea of Howard, that you can't escape your genes or racial memory, only it's presented in a humorous way because Kanina wants nothing more than to escape her inherited barbarism. This is why the humor of Sourcery falls a little flat for me, and why it might not strike some people as very funny. Even if Pratchett is having fun with the racist ideas espoused by Howard, the jokes all operate under the assumption that these racist ideas are still true and valid, which is something of a stain on the overall book. Now, in complete fairness, there is far worse you could be reading, and if these sorts of jokes aren't a problem for you, then that's totally fine. I think, though, since a big reason behind these videos is to explain to newcomers what to expect from each book, that I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't at least warn people about this. And I myself am personally very glad that Pratchett chose to never give credence to these ideas, or at least not to the extent he does here, in future books. Final verdict. Despite my complaining, I don't actually hate Sourcery. There are plenty of genuinely humorous moments and things that I enjoyed, such as the genie being a parody of 80s yuppies, or the way Rincewind saves the day at the end. However, I don't really like it either. There's too much that compares unfavorably to other Discworld books, and too much that I just found kind of eh. I think if there is a lesson to be learned from Sourcery, it's that trying to recapture lightning in a bottle doesn't usually work. There were later Rincewind stories that were good, and in some cases far better than The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic. However, these all managed to work precisely because they broke the rules that the first two Rincewind stories set. instead of trying to repeat all the steps with none of the passion, like Sourcery does. No matter how good something is, people get tired of it if you keep serving it to them without variation. So it's important to be willing to try new things with your characters and world. Navigating the perfect balance between the new and the familiar is always a challenge for any series, but trying something new, even if it's a failure, tends to at least be more memorable than something like Sourcery. I think my ambivalence towards Sourcery can best be summed up with a neutral 5 out of 10. It's not bad, but it's not good either. It's just sort of But cheer up! This is the worst the series ever gets, which means that everything afterwards will be just a little bit better. So, I'm Mark Akeen, signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did and you'd like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next one.